All right, welcome to today's edition of the Post-Gazette Live. I'm Paul Zeise, and of course, we have lots of things to get to today. We have Steelers issues to get to. One of the first things I'm going to address, however, is I hear this quite often, and I don't quite understand where it comes from. But there are people that are actually thoroughly convinced that the Steelers are basically somehow being targeted by referees. That the Steelers are basically in a situation where referees are trying to hold them back, trying to make sure that they, lose. I'm not sure exactly what the story is, but the reality is they're not. And I have yet to hear a single explanation from anybody that comes up with these theories as to why would the NFL want to hurt the Steelers. So that's where we're going to start right now. Why would the NFL want to hurt the Steelers? It doesn't make sense, period. It doesn't make any sense. If you think about it, it makes no sense from the standpoint of the NFL is in business to make money. The NFL is in business to drive up interest in itself, and basically, it's one of these things where the NFL is going to basically not really openly root, but they're going to root for teams like the Steelers to win. That's the point. The Steelers are one of their signature franchises, one of the most important franchises they have. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, okay, they're one of the franchises that basically if you're the NFL, you want to succeed. So the idea that they would do something to hurt the Steelers, or they're out to get the Steelers, or they're targeting the Steelers is silly to me. It really is, just from the standpoint of the NFL needs the Steelers to survive and thrive, especially with some of the other franchises that are, that are basically out there that they rely on that are struggling. So to me, when I look at or when I hear people talk about, well, they're out to get the Steelers or whatever, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It never really has. I mean, I hear about, well, TJ Watt gets held on every single play and there's never a call. Every single edge rusher that I can come up with that is a great edge rusher, they all think they get held on every single play as well. So to me, this thing about the Steelers, that there was some conspiracy against the Steelers in order to try and, allow the Eagles to win the game the other day, it's just really kind of silly to me. It just is. And I just don't get it. I hear it more often than I should. And I feel like it's important to note that you can't come up with a theory as to why the Steelers would be a team that's being targeted. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, period. And so I look at all of the different ways that the Steelers lost the game on Sunday. And you know what? None of it had anything to do with the officials. There was one play, okay, where obviously there was a fight or whatever in the end zone. And it came out that it was basically the Steelers were the team that was penalized. You want to tell me that cost them a touchdown? Okay, yeah, probably did. And here's the thing. I get it. I understand why people are upset about it. By the same token, you know what? It's a part of it. And then a little bit later, if you really want to get down to it, they got a holding call against the Eagles, probably took one of their touchdowns off the board. So, in the end, it kind of all evens out, period. And that's what I always say when I hear people talk about the officials all the time. It just gets so old, because what you're doing basically is you're creating a story that doesn't exist. Steelers didn't lose because the officials were out to get them. I don't even, like I said, outside of the call that the where they called it, what was it, unnecessary roughness on the Steelers, and it wasn't offsetting penalties. Outside of that call, I don't know. To me, it seemed like the game was called reasonably well. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I think this is a part of it, one of the things that I've noticed is when you have so much money at stake with gambling, and so many people have access to gambling now, what we've found is that there is a lot more interest in what's going on in these games. The minutiae of these games is really one of these things where the minutia is basically going to be torn apart because people are trying to figure out why their bets aren't winning. And when you used to watch the NFL, I think there was betting and there was gambling, but not like today. Not like today where everybody's got their phone in their hands all the time and they can live bet on games immediately and they can bet, on plays. I mean, you can basically sit and bet on every play that's going to happen. And so there's just a lot more scrutiny when it comes to betting right now. And when people are so dialed in all the time to every single thing that's happening, I think that's the biggest reason why it seems like we talk about officials a lot more than we ever used to. I think people are basically in a place right now where, so many people bet all the time on especially on the NFL, and you can bet on football games. You can bet almost immediately. Like you can bet really, on like I said, on each play if you really want to. You can live bet on games. You can bet on games, as they're happening. You can bet on games before, there's so much gambling right now and everybody's doing it. People that they never used to be involved in gambling are even now involved in gambling. I know some people that are, like housewives who basically, who they got an app on their phone and they go, it gives them something to do, gives them some reason to watch these games. So to me, the prevalence of gambling is why we talk about officiating a lot more than we ever used to. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know that officials are worse now than they were 10 years ago. Do you believe that? I don't. I think they're just probably the same. They probably miss as many calls as they used to. Sometimes they don't miss any calls. Sometimes they miss a lot of calls. But I don't believe that they're worse than they used to be. Some people are convinced of that. I think it's just that we're paying a lot more attention to what they're doing. And if you think about the other part of it, replay, for instance, how conditioned are we now to watch every single replay, and try and figure out, well, okay, this happened or that happened. And now, you've got the DVR on your TV. You can actually rewind the game 15 times if you want to watch replays. So I just think that we're just, in many ways, we're just basically scrutinizing a lot more close what goes on. And I think part of it, again, is because everybody is gambling. And so, when, as somebody who gambles from time to time, I can tell you, you really believe that the universe is out to get you. Even though there's millions and millions of people who have bet on this game, you really believe that the universe is out to get you. It's just how it is. If you're a gambler out there, you know what I'm talking about. You believe that. And so it's very easy to, look at a certain call or a call here, a call there or whatever, and basically say, oh, man, that was the wrong call, or that call screwed this team, or that call screwed that team. I understand it. Trust me. But I just think that really, when you look at the big picture to me is that the Steelers are one of the most important franchises in the league. It's a signature franchise, one of the most popular teams in the league. And so if that being the case, it's the most popular, one of the most popular teams in the league. I just don't think that there was any way, or where there would be any way really, where you could sit here and say that they are trying to, screw over the Steelers, because it just doesn't make sense. They want the Steelers to win. They want the Steelers to go deep in the playoffs. They want the Steelers to be, because the Steelers are going to bring ratings. The Steelers are going to bring revenue. The Steelers are going to bring people to the TVs. And you look, all you need to do is look and see when they go on the road, how many people are, in each one of these cities that they go to that are Steeler fans. One of the misnomers of all misnomers is when we sit here and we talk about, the Steelers fans travel all over the place. Well, no, really, they don't travel. They don't travel for the most part. They're in all of these cities. Some places you go like Atlanta, or, there's some places where you go where there's just a ton of, California, where there's a lot of transplanted Steeler fans. And that's where they're at. So it's not necessarily just because, again, it's not because of what I would call Steeler fans traveling. There's Steeler fans everywhere. And there are transplanted Pittsburghers everywhere. I used to be a cab driver. One of the things that always made me laugh was on, the weekend of a Steeler home game, the number of people that I would pick up at the airport to bring into town that were big-time Steeler fans who had never been to Pittsburgh before, And I'll tell you where a lot of them are from, Mexico. I mean, you pick up a lot of these people coming from Mexico for the weekend. It was the first Steeler game ever, and they were excited. It's funny. I went to Aruba. There's actually an Aruba. There's actually a Steeler bar in Aruba. But when I was flying down to Aruba, I was sitting next to a guy who basically he lives in Aruba, and his favorite team is the Steelers, and he flies up for one game every year. So to me, I think when you look at it, if we're going to sit here and if you're going to try and tell me that the Steelers are being targeted by the refs, you have to come up with an explanation for me. Why? Why would that be the case? Period. That's what I'd like to know, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make financial sense for the league. And I would be willing to bet, and of course I haven't looked at it, but I'd be willing to bet that probably a lot of people bet on the Steelers. So, it just doesn't make sense to me in many, many ways. If you think that the games are fixed against the Steelers, or the league is targeting the Steelers, that just doesn't make sense at all. Now on to some other more important things when we talk about the Steelers. I had to get that off my chest, though. I'm just tired of hearing about how there's basically this conspiracy against the Steelers, because it just is. It's really kind of silly to me. They lost this game to the Eagles mostly because the Eagles are a better football team than the Steelers. There's a couple of important places. There's a couple of important areas where they're just better than the Steelers. One of them, I think one of the most obvious ones, is basically the offensive line. And the Eagles' offensive line completely controlled that game. And as we've seen, no matter how many different ways football is played, no matter how many different spread offenses and all these other, new high-age technology type offenses, or whatever you want to call them, doesn't matter how many there are. One thing that is universally true is that the team that can control the line of scrimmage is generally going to win the game. If you can dominate the line of scrimmage, no matter what your system is, no matter how you play offense, no matter what you're trying to do, no matter what, guess what? You can get it done because your offensive line is dominating. It makes the game so much easier to play. And so to me, when I look at it from that standpoint, the Eagles were just better than the Steelers. And I'm not sure why it's so hard for some Steeler fans just to say that from time to time. I mean, I get it. We've got 24-hour, 7-day a week where we're hammered with information. And so, and a lot of different outlets and blogs and podcasts and, radio shows and everything else. And so people have to, fill a lot of time talking about the Steelers. And so that's why there's so much analysis of every single thing that goes on. But again, I'll be honest with you. When I look at it, I'm sorry. I try and be as objective as I can. I try and be as basically as as realistic as I can. And my thing was, this game was just basically a case of the Eagles are better than the Steelers. Now we look forward. Now we're going to move ahead here. One of the big things now is the health of T.J. Watt, the health of George Pickens. Clearly, the Steelers have had the Ravens' numbers. Clearly, they are basically, capable of and well, positioned to beat that team. They just know how to do it. One thing that the Steelers do really well, and a lot of it has to do with the way they play defense, but also I think they've got good players that run well. These running quarterbacks don't generally run all over the Steelers. They don't run wild against the Steelers. And the thing about Lamar Jackson is, yes, he's the ultimate weapon. Yes, he's a great, great player. But the one thing we've seen, teams that can make him one-dimensional have a lot of success against him. And the thing that Steelers do on defense is they make it so that he can't run all over them. They I don't know if they, sometimes they use a spy, sometimes they just use a scheme. Sometimes they use, multiple guys running at them. They do everything in their power to keep them in the pockets. So I think that, that is one of their strategies, that until Lamar Jackson proves he can beat them just passing the ball, I just don't see how, I just don't see how they're going, the Ravens are going to score a ton of points. Now, one interesting thing to me, obviously, if T.J. Watt can't play and George Pickens can't play, and they didn't practice today, both of them didn't practice today, by the way. But if that doesn't mean they're not going to play, it just means they're still banged up a little bit. I saw some video of George Pickens. He's out there, he's doing some drills. He's trying to just kind of test how much he can run, how much he can cut, all that other stuff. And then of course Watt, I have a feeling he's going to play, period. I just do. I think he's the kind of guy who's going to play. He'll find a way to play and make it so he's out there and he can do what he needs to do. But nevertheless, one thing that was real interesting is that Mike Tomlin pointed out in his press conference, the Ravens defense is a little different now than it was to start the season, because they have they've taken on a quote unquote defensive consultant in Dean Pease, who's a long time coach. I mean, he's been in the league forever. He's been, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was actually the coach at like Kent State or Akron or one of those places. He's been around a long time. He was a head coach for a little bit. He's allegedly a defensive guru. Anyway, he's been consulting with the Ravens over the last 8 to 9 weeks or whatever. And so Mike Tomlin says, I'm going to point something out to you that's different. And that is that, when you look at the defense that we saw the first time we played, when we looked at all the tapes, versus what they're doing now, it's completely different. And, he went on to basically say, they've done a whole lot of different things to make sure that they don't give up big plays. And apparently, like in the last 4 games, they've given up 2 passes of 20 yards or more, something like that. They basically are putting a lid on your offense. They're making you methodically beat them down, methodically beat them down the field. That's similar, to the Steelers strategy, by the way. It's not quite the Tampa 2, but obviously Mike Tomlin has a lot of that philosophy in him, the Tampa 2 philosophy. It's basically making teams, keeping the offense in front of you and making them beat you down the field. I mean, the Steelers basically believe this. If they don't give up explosives, if you're going to try and have like a 10-play drive against the Steelers down the field, at some point there's going to be a breakdown. At some point, one of their guys is going to make a play. At some point, you're going to face, you're going to be behind the chain, so to speak. That's apparently what we're seeing now with the Ravens. that they're basically playing a little differently than they were. If you remember, they were horrible. They were horrible against the pass. They were horrible in a lot of ways. They were giving up a lot of points. They were giving up a lot of big plays. Like Mike Tomlin said, if you watch the tape now with the Ravens, because now it looks like Dean Pease is basically, he hasn't taken over the defense, but he clearly has now begun to influence the defense. He said they're not giving up big plays. They're going to, mix some things up with their safeties. They're going to keep two guys high. They're going to make it so you have to throw the ball in front of them. And then when you do, they're going to tackle, and that's a big, big part of it. It's one thing to be able to keep the lid on a defense. And I think, honestly, schematically, for the most part, you should be able to do that if you really are committed to that. But the thing about it is when they throw the ball underneath, if it's a 5-yard, he throws it 5 yards, you got to make the tackle at 5 yards. What becomes a problem is when their receivers start running wild. That becomes a problem. And so, and we saw in this last game against the Eagles, the Steelers missed some tackles that really led from, they were going to get off the field to, now all of a sudden, they're giving up a first down or in the one case, basically a touchdown. I think that's the key here. The key to me is when you obviously you're going to keep it in front of you, okay, you got to tackle. And what Mike Tomlin said, we're seeing from the Ravens, what's different from the first time is that basically the first time around when he was watching the film, getting ready for the Ravens, they were giving up big plays. They were getting beat over the top. They were getting, they were giving up plays and easy, not necessarily easy, but big play touchdowns, and they were giving up big plays, big chunks of yardage, all that stuff. Now, they're still really good against the run, which is obviously, I think, any good defense, usually that's what they, start with. They predicated on stopping the run. And they're able to do it with their 4 guys up front. And the reality is, but now they're good at containing the pass as well. So that, to me, I thought was one of the most interesting things that came out of the press conference, because let's face it, the Mike Tomlin press conference, just like every coach's press conference, for the most part, is usually a dog and pony show. There isn't that much that comes out of it. And he's very good. It's a TV show. So he knows he's got to fill like 25 minutes of content or whatever, right? He's very good at what I call filibustering, where he just basically talks about the other team for like 12 minutes. And then it's like, okay, now all of a sudden we're halfway through. Okay, now we'll open it up to questions. But he'll just, ramble on and on and on and on about the other team and goes through every position and every player. And, this week it was Mr. Jackson and all this other stuff, that's fine. It's what it is. It's filler content. But I thought it was really interesting. When he was talking about the difference in the Ravens defense. And if you can find a clip online, I'm sure sooner or later I'm going to be able to play clips on here for you and react to them. But if you find that clip online of Mike Tomlin talking about the Ravens defense and the difference now versus back then, it's pretty much an interesting look at how, bringing in a guy as a consultant who obviously is somebody who really understands defense and allowing him to make, some subtle changes has all of a sudden the Ravens are playing really good defense again. Of course, that doesn't matter. These games are going to be that way anyway, just because I think both of these coaches they get awfully conservative when they play against each other. They get awfully conservative. And I think, that leads to some of these, like the last time they played, it was 18-16 or whatever it was. I think part of that is these two coaches know each other well. And, I just think that it's the way they approach the game. But I do think that it's going to be very interesting, very, very interesting, okay, to see if it indeed is going to be a defense that can shut down the Steelers. Now, of course, if George Pickens isn't around, keeping the lid on the Steelers offense is not going to be that hard. They don't really have someone to take the lid, to take the deep. I guess Mike Williams, I don't know, not really. But my point is, if you don't have George Pickens, that's your big play threat. That's where it goes. And I just tell you, it's incredible to me It's incredible to me when you look at the Steelers without George Pickens and with George Pickens. Now, there is a question that I've had a number of people ask me about George Pickens, and that is, should they err on the side of caution and keep him out one more week if he's not 100% ready so that they can have him for the playoffs? And there's something to be said for that. But here's the thing. As we know, if they win this game, they win the AFC North. I don't know. I'm going to go with all hands on deck. Anybody that is cleared and can play, guess what? All hands on deck, period. And if he can play, I would play him. I wouldn't worry about, if he tweaks it, then he might be out a couple of weeks. Because the reality is, if you win this game, you win the division. Forget about the number one seed. You're not getting the number one seed, okay? So let's forget about that. It's just there's no reason to even have that conversation anymore. I think the Chiefs just have to win one more game, I think, maybe, or something like that. Either way, the key is winning the AFC North. If you win the AFC North, then the next 2 weeks you can rest guys, you can get guys ready, you can do all those things. And it's going to be, a situation of where if you have 2 full weeks where you don't have to necessarily win, it's really, really, really almost like having a bye in the playoffs. Because only one team gets a bye. Only one team has that luxury of being able to have 2 weeks off, basically. And that's the team with the number one seed. Now, there are some people that say, well, we should, I wish that would change. It's not fair. If you win your division, maybe you should get a bye or something like that. They're never going to do that. Again, the NFL exists to make money. The whole point of putting a 7th team in the playoffs, is basically so that they can have 6 games on Wild Card Weekend. And if you look at it, they basically are going to take up every time spot possible. In fact, I think there's a Monday night game, isn't there? The first week of the playoffs. I think there's 2 games maybe Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, and then there's a Monday night game. And there's some people that think, well, that's not fair, but it's not about fair. It's about how do we get the most eyes possible on the playoffs. That's what it is. So to me, if you're not going to win the bye and you're not going to earn the bye by being the number one seed, if you're the Steelers, winning this week is just as good. It really is. From the standpoint of you can basically then take 2 weeks off. You obviously you're not. You're going to try and win every game you can and see if you can, maybe you get the number 2 seed or whatever. But the reality is there really that big of a difference if you win your division? Is there that big of a difference between playing the Chargers and the Broncos? I don't think so. At home, which is all you're really talking about. It looks like the Chargers are going to be the 7 seed and the Broncos are going to be the 6 seed. So if you stay behind Buffalo, you're going to probably play the Broncos. And if you get ahead of Buffalo, you're probably going to play the Chargers. Either way, you're going to get 2 teams that you've beaten. You're going to get them on your home field. 2 teams that you've already beaten. That should be the focus. That's why this week, in general, like for instance, if this was the Eagles game this week, I would say yes, play it a little safe with Pickens and play it a little safe with TJ Watt. Not this game, because this game, if you win it, everything else you need is going to fall in place. And I think both of those guys, like I said, it sounds like TJ Watt's got like a minor ankle sprain. He should be fine. Pickens, obviously a hamstring can be tricky, especially when you're a guy who relies on running like he does. By the way, game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street in the South Side, and you can get 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday. All weekend long, you can get the game, playoff games. And of course, when I say playoff games this weekend, I mean college football playoff games are on at Archie's, but also all these games on Sunday will be on at Archie's as well. So get down to Archie's. And when you get there, tell them Paul Zeise sent you. And you could even try my grilled cheese sandwich. One thing that's interesting is the Steelers and the Ravens are both going to play on a little bit of a short week. I don't know that it really matters that much. I think one of the things we talk a little too much about is the short week versus the long week. For one thing, when travel was, by train, I guess, or whatever, I guess it was, or commercial air, I guess it was a problem. But now, I mean, these guys, the travel is not a problem. They all travel, charter flights. So, the Steelers will go, I guess it's in Baltimore. The Steelers on Friday night will get on a charter, or Friday afternoon or whatever. They'll get on a charter. They'll be in Baltimore in like 25 minutes. They'll have a police escort to their hotel, and they'll be fine. This short week doesn't matter. They can even have a practice down there because it's not like you're taking a whole day to travel. Even if you go to the West Coast, you're not taking a whole day to travel when you have chartered flights. It's just you're not. So, that we talk a little too much about that at times. But I do think that one less day of practice, one less day of preparation and all that other stuff, I don't know. Both teams have to do it, right? I don't know that it's really going to be that big of a deal. Nor do I think that it's going to be that big of a deal that both teams are going to play, 3 games in like 11 days or something, because they both are playing on Thanksgiving. Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are doing it too. The Ravens are doing it. I don't care. I'm on Thanksgiving. Christmas, I mean, I don't care about that stuff either. You got to play the schedule. Go play the schedule. I think the best teams figure it out. The worst teams, they find a way to complain about or create excuses. But I'll tell you this, if you're not one of the best teams, you don't get asked to play on Christmas. It's that simple. All right, we'll do it again tomorrow. Thanks for joining in. I am Paul Zeise. We are, as always, do this at 5 o'clock or right around 5 o'clock every single day. We try and talk Steelers. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about the college football playoffs, I think, just from the standpoint of it is kind of a unique and neat thing. And, of course, then we will start ramping it up and getting
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.